A very good day to one and everyone present here in today's workshop. My name is Sid, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to participate in this workshop series from Manage Engine. This is Sid from Manage Engine, and I am going to be your presenter in today's workshop series. Our agenda is going to be focusing on AD delegation and business workflow. So before we dive deep into the third workshop series from Manage Engine, I'm going to give you a quick recap on the topics that we had discussed previously. Once again, thank you so much again for taking the time and participating in today's workshop. To begin with, in the first 2 weeks of Manage Engine, we had learned how using ADManager you can create template and CSV-based advanced AD user provisioning. With the help of a template, I can define which fields can be set as mandatory and which template can be associated to a technician when he's performing a specific user creation for a specific department or for a specific OU. At the same time, we also learned how you can provision AD attributes, exchange-related properties, Office 365, and link all within one single window. We had also learned using user modification templates, you can update a user's group membership and other locations in case if his location or if his department has been modified to a different one. We also learned few bulk user modifications too. For example, in case if your file server is about to get decommissioned, how using ADManager within a few clicks you can move the user's home folder into a new file server, including all the existing files as well. And apart from that, we also learned how you can migrate mailboxes, how you can identify and free up your licenses with respect to Office 365, and also how you can handle duplication even much better when it comes to user creation templates. And yes, all this information are available in our first 2 videos. I'm going to share the link to you shortly. With that said, today's topics would be focusing on delegation and workflow. So we would come to know how you can delegate a specific role without making any errors to your technician, or it could even be to your HR when creating users. We will also learn how you can restrict a certain OU to a technician when he's trying to perform a user modification or a creation activity. That's going to be in terms of delegation. And in terms of workflow, we would come to know why business workflow is the most important section when it comes to organizing your Active Directory. We can also learn how you can auto-assign tickets to the right technician and also track the progress when that task comes. So with that said, let me now quickly take you to our product and show you the features. So for those who don't have a test installation, I have the ADManager Plus hosted for you over the internet. So all you will have to do is just get into admp.cloudapp.net. You should see that information in your chat, and the username is going to be ADMP and the password is going to be workshop with W capitalized, and the logon to is going to be ADManager Plus authentication. For those who have their ADManager Plus installation, you can very well practice these tasks along with me. And below the link, I've also given you the URL to access the videos of the previous workshop with respect to the workshop 1 and workshop 2. Once again, if you have any queries, you can please go ahead and use the chat window to have your questions. So with that said, let me now take you to the quick session of ADManager focusing on AD delegation and business workflow. With that said, let me now log in to ADManager. So just a quick reminder again, the first 2 topics what we had covered were more in terms of user creation and modification templates, and of course, performing bulk user modification. And in today's topic, we're going to learn how you can delegate a specific task to your technician or to your HRs and how you can even associate a business workflow. With that said, let's come into AD delegation. Now, when I try to compare my native delegation and in terms of ADManager, here are a few positives when it comes to this product over here. When it comes to native AD, you'll probably have to delegate a certain OU and you will have to granularly design each and every role. It could be, of course, time consuming. At the same time, there could be a chance that you might give a few privileges which are totally not required for the technician. Delegated native AD is a bit hectic over here, and we're going to overcome that specific task using ADManager. With that said, let me show you how you can create a role and have that associated to a technician. So on the AD delegation tab on my left hand side, I've got help desk roles over here. And over here, I can define which role needs to be set for which technician. With that said, I'm going to click on create new role on the right hand side, and I'm going to show you by how I can easily create a role. For instance, let me now create a role such that this technician should only be able to perform help desk based activities. With that said, I am now going to type in the role name over here. So once I'm done typing the role and description, I'm going to choose what activities this technician can perform. So I'm going to ensure that this technician over here should be able to perform a password reset. Now, when it comes to granularity over here, we're going to define this using this role itself. When it comes to performing a password reset, there are a few other flags which are also being set. And I'm going to make sure only the necessary ones are being selected over here, which means I can ensure that the technician should not have access to password never expires flag, and the technician should type in a password every time when he performs a password reset. So with that said, I will now have this closed and choose a few other options such as unlocking accounts, performing group modifications, the ability to enable or disable accounts over here, and of course, if you notice over here, there are a few other flags which are also being set under the user account properties, and our task is to ensure only the enable/disable option is being chosen. With that said, all I will do is save this role and ensure that this is being done in terms of modification and have this saved. So once this is done, I need to ensure that this role that I have created should be associated to my technician. I will now get into help desk technicians on the left hand pane, and I am going to associate this role to one of my technicians. So we will assign this role to the technician help desk. I've chosen the role over here, and now I can also decide in which OUs this technician should have access to. So before we choose that, let me show you how exactly is going to be the interface of this account when I go with the entire organization. So we're just going to go with the default settings over here, and we'll have the changes saved. With that said, let me now log in as the help desk. So I'm going to sign out and now log in as the help desk technician. Now, if you notice over here, the user interface for the help desk is quite different because these are the only operations we had chosen for this technician. That is, these are the only roles that have been specified under the help desk role. And those are performing a password reset, unlocking accounts, performing group management activities, and enabling and disabling accounts. So with that said, let me say for instance, I click on modify single user over here. I've got access to all the OUs and the users within them. So which means I can perform this operation on any accounts over here. So all I would do is just click on modify user, and if you notice, the only roles what I have been assigned to is performing a password reset, unlocking accounts, and the option to enable or disable accounts over here. All the other attributes in this role, in this template will be disabled. So let's say for instance I click on the account tab over here. the only options what I can do is performing a password reset, or in case the account has been logged out, I can have this unlocked, and in case the account is being disabled, I can have it enabled. So this is the limitation when I can have when coming to a help desk role, as in you define the necessary role and the necessary permissions this technician should have. Now, as I had said, this is applying for the whole organization, and you might have different locations in your AD itself. Let me now sign out and show you how exactly you can start giving this role only to specific locations, or in terms of specific OUs over here. With that said, let me now log in as an admin. So once I log in as an admin right now, let me go back to AD delegation, and on for this technician, the one which had performed the modification over here, I'm going to define that this user should not have access to all the OUs. So you might have scenarios in which you might have a location in Saudi, you might have a location in US or in the UK, and I'm going to ensure that this technician should have access only on certain OUs which I feel it should have too. So with that said, what I would do is I'm going to ensure that this technician over here should only have access to the US and the UK region. With that said, I've just chosen the two OUs over here, and I will click on OK. Now, at the same time, when I need to perform a certain user creation or user modification, I need to ensure only the certain templates should be selected for that technician itself. So I can click on Add Edit Templates, and I can define which modification templates should be enabled for the user account. At the same time, I can also define when a user is creating an account, which templates that user should have access to. Now, two other features what you have noticed over here would be the option to add and remove certain groups for the technician itself. Now, there are critical groups in your Active Directory which you don't want the user to have access to, because this role defined over here will have the option to modify the user's group membership by choosing specific groups over here. Accidentally, if I try to add or remove a certain group for a user, that might cause a bit of chaos over here in the Active Directory organization. And to overcome that, I can ensure that only certain groups are being visible for the technician when he's performing a modification over here. So what I will do is, I'm going to just click on Add, and I'm going to ensure only certain groups are being chosen over here. For instance, I'm going to have this group selected, and I can also choose groups based on certain OUs as well. So what I shall do is I can just enable the service desk UK and the help desk keywords over here and click on OK. So with that said, my account, that is this role, this technician over here, will only have access to these groups present in these OUs. Now the second feature what I would like to emphasize would be the impersonation as an admin. What does this mean? Now let's say for instance this helpdesk account is a local one, but you try to add another domain user, and let's say in case if that domain user does not have any access to your Active Directory, which means he could just be a domain user who can just perform, which means you don't have to provide any access to him in your AD itself. What I can do is, if he's a domain user, I can check the impersonate as an admin, which means this user will be proxying this account over here, which is configured in the domain settings of ADManager. So what happens over here is I can configure a domain admin account. So this is going to be the account which is going to be running in the background to perform the operations. So you might have a question that now that the impersonate as an admin is being selected, it means that this user is performing all the operations. How will you come to know that what actions are being done by the technician itself? Well, we will have all that information covered for you under the audit reports. So when you get into audit reports, you can find out what actions or tasks have been performed by the help desk technician itself. For instance, all I would do is just choose the account, say help desk, click on OK, and I can choose a period of the last 30 days, and I click on go. So it is going to show me what actions have been done by the help desk associate over here. So you can show that over here, which means in case if the attempt was success, it's going to show you that status accordingly. In case it didn't have the permission or it had an error encountered, you can find those details right in this report. So with that said, what I've done is I have ensured that this technician should have access only to certain OUs, and at the same time I've also defined which groups should be selected for this technician as well. So with that said, what I shall do is I'm going to sign out and I'm going to show you what are the operations I can do and how granular this has become when I log in now as the help desk account. So once I log in, if you can notice, the roles remains the same. But if I try to perform, let's say, a reset password, and if you click on add OUs, these are the only OUs are available for the technician to modify, to perform any modification. And at the same time, if I need to ensure that certain group, if I need to perform a group management over here, if I click on add to group, these are the only groups I can have for the technician over here because I have decided only a certain groups should be available, that is should be visible for this technician. So that's how you can define the role for a technician and how you can modify this role to suit your AD requirements. ADManager Plus help desk roles and technicians is quite granular and error-free when it comes to comparing your native Active Directory. So with that said, we have learned how you can delegate an error-free, role to your technicians over here, how you can easily define the custom role and how you can define the level of groups that have to be associated for the technician over here. With that said, we will now quickly log in back as the admin to show you the next focusing on workflow. So when it comes to business workflow in terms of your Active Directory itself, you will always have the option to do a change management, which means before the request has to be approved, it has to go through a process. One requesting, the other one's reviewing, and the funnel of course being an approval process. So we have defined the same using the business workflow in ADManager, and this is important for critical tasks as in creating service accounts or modifying the group membership and so on. So the business workflow can be modified with 4 different roles over here, starting with the requestar who is going to raise a ticket, the reviewer who is going to find out what happens in case if that request is being approved or if it's been rejected, and then you will have the approver who will authorize that specific task which has been sent out by the requestar and reviewed by the reviewer, and then you shall have the executor, the one who is going to have the final call to perform the task. Now in most business workflows, as far as I have seen, you can ensure that you can just have the maximum of 3 roles. You can have a requestar, a reviewer, and then the approver. And few organizations I've seen, they would just have the requestar, one who's going to raise a ticket, and then the approver, who is going to perform the review process and the approval process. But for our simplification, let us just go with 3 roles over here. The requestar who's going to raise a ticket, the reviewer who's going to search for any faults or who's going to review the complete ticket over here with the necessary perspectives and the consequences, and then you will have the approver whose final say is to have this ticket approved or have it rejected. With that said, let me now have this saved, this business workflow for you. So my initial task over here is to ensure that how am I going to define this business workflow over here. So what I will have to do is, let us say for instance, I'm going to have one of the HRs to be the requestar. So what I shall do is, I will click on to requesters over here and click on associate help desk technicians to requesters. And over here, I can choose the requester. So let us say it's going to be the HR associate, and I'm just going to click on OK. And then I'm going to define the role for this specific request star. Now here are a few predefined request stars over here, such as user modification, user creation, and so on. And if you want to define your very own role for the request stars, yes, that can also be done through the request star roles over here. To give you a quick glance, let me just take you to the request star roles over here, and I'm going to show you how you can create a role for this technician. So when I click on to create new role over here, I'm going to have this named as ME creation and modification. And after that, I'm going to define what tasks this requester can raise. So for example, he has to create accounts, that's for sure. And at the same time, this account should also have the option to perform group management attributes. So he can add and remove users from the groups over here. With that said, let me now have this saved. So once the requester role has been created, I will now just simply have to assign this role to the requester. So I shall get into requesters over here, and what my next step would be is to first associate the technician. So I can either choose a domain account, or I can choose the local accounts in, that is the technicians in ADManager Plus. So I'm going to go with the help desk over here, click on OK, and the role that we have defined, the requester role, and I'm just simply going to click on add to request stars. So this technician over here will have the opportunity to request a user creation or modification. Now we shall now have a reviewer, and that's going to be the HR associate who is going to review those tasks over here. Or I can have an admin account. Let's say for example I've got a technician called Sid who is a domain user, and of course a technician in ADManager Plus as well. So I'm going to ensure that Sid is going to be the reviewer over here. And in terms of the approver, I'm going to ensure only the admin has got the option to approve the request. So with that said, I've just chosen only the necessary technicians over here for my business workflow. Once I have this saved, let me now try creating a request over here. So with that said, this being the help desk account over here, let me now sign out and log in as the help desk. Alright, so now that I've logged in, I will have the request tab over here, and this options over here will define me the operations to perform a single user creation and also group management for the users as well. So what I will do is, let's say when I go for create single user creation, let me first fill in the necessary details, and I also have an option where I can choose the necessary templates in the requester role. So I can choose in any template over here that I've been defined. And after that, I'm going to choose input the necessary information over here, such as first name, and then input the last name over here. Now since the template has been chosen, all the necessary attributes would have been defined. So with the help of template, if you could notice, even the mandatory attributes have also been set. And I'm just going to do a quick look into it, get into the account tab. Yes, the information has been set over here. And if I just do a quick check on the contact tab, alright, so I've got all the information being filled, and now I will just have to input the subject. So user creation, and let's say for instance I try to remove a few groups over here. I try to add a few groups over here, and I click on OK. And what I will do is just simply click on create request. What this would do is, this is not going to create the account, but instead this has been raised as a ticket to the next level of approval, which is going to be the reviewer. So when I sign out and I log in as one of the reviewers over here, which is Sid, I'm going to have that notification. Yes, you can also set up notification and assigning rules as well, which we will come to the next level over here. Okay, so once you've received the notification, you will find that ticket under the all request. So you can have that under user creation, and you can find what level of attributes have been defined for this user creation. So if you get into it, you can notice that all the attributes have been filled. However, let's say you're not satisfied with the group membership or a specific account expires properties or the contact information and so on. So you've got the complete option to have this changed, which means I can even add the admins or I can remove the specific groups over here, and I can just click on OK. So which means this has now gone to the next level, as in the approval process over here. So now that you've reviewed the ticket and the notification has been sent to the admin that, hey, this request has been reviewed completely, and you receive the notification, you will now log in as the admin or as the approver over here. So once you've logged in as the approver, you will find that ticket under the all request tab. And if you notice, you can check again, what object has been created, what are the attributes that have been defined over here. And let us say, for instance, if it meets your business environment, you can go and create the account. But let's say you're still not satisfied with the necessary groups being added over here and you want to make a modification. All you will have to do is you can either remove the necessary groups over here, or you can simply ensure that this ticket is being rejected, and that can also be sent as a notification too. So if you're satisfied, you can click on the review and then input the necessary comments and click on OK. Or let us say you're not happy with this ticket over here because you do suspect a bit of information being misleading, or if you're not satisfied with the ticket over here, all you can do is just simply click on reject. As simple as that. So as I discussed previously on how you can make up these business notifications over here is by the option you can find under the configuration. So the ones which I'm going to show you right now is the notification rules over here. So whenever a request has been created, you can define a specific notification that needs to be sent to the next level. So which means if the request is going to be created, you can define which technicians should be notified on this request. So I can ensure that all the technicians over here should have notification. Or let us say you have a DL or any other mail groups over here, you can even have that added over here too. So let's say service desk at manageengine.com, and I'm going to add this deal over here. So let's say, for instance, you will always have a requirement whenever a user has been created. The mail has to be sent to a DL so that they can take care of the user's equipment and other necessary features for that account. So let us say, for instance, in case if my message over here will say that a request for user creation has been created by the user at so and so time. Once this receives a notification to the DL, or it receives a notification to the user, they will have this email based on the macros that I can define over here. So that's one way to notify the necessary technicians over here. At the same time, when the request is being reviewed, I can have the option to define which notifications should be notified, and at the same time I can also customize the email such that this request has been now reviewed and the necessary steps can be taken. So you can customize this email as per your business needs. So with that said, I can customize and I can notify, which technician should receive an email, whenever a request has been created, reviewed, approved, or have it rejected. Those are the notification rules I have for you in the business workflow. And of course, assigning rules. This is the most critical feature when it comes to a business workflow over here. Now, being an AD organization, you might have a flow of tickets, and not every technician, should have the burden, to access all the tickets over here. So this is where you can define the rules when it comes to the business workflow. Let's say, for instance, you want to ensure that all the HR user creation requests should only be handled by a specific account, or the option to perform a user modification activities should be assigned to another help desk account over here. Well, we can define these rules under the assigning rules concept over here. You can evaluate the request and ensure that request should be assigned to the required technician. For example, let me click on add new role over here, and what this would do is I'm going to ensure that anyone from the HR department team, if they are going to raise a ticket, that ticket over here should be assigned to one of the admin accounts responsible for user creation. So this is going to be HR2, the admin for user creation. And once I have this specific rule saved, anybody whom I try to add from the requesters over here, if he's going to be someone from the HR department, his request is going to be assigned to Sid. And of course, you can choose the level of priority over here, whether it has to be a medium one or a high one. Now, similarly, in case if a specific modification has to be done to a specific account, it could be modifying the user's group membership, or it could be to modify the user's contact attributes and so on. So in case if that is going to be the request, I can ensure that those requests are being assigned to one of my help desk accounts over here. So I'm going to click on add rule over here and give this name as modify rules. So I can choose a criteria over here. Let's say in case if the action is any of the modifications over here except for user creation and for adding, let's say, deleting computers. So I'm just going to ensure only the necessary actions over here are being selected. So it's going to be enabling and disabling accounts, deleting accounts, moving users from one OU to another, performing a password reset, managing a group membership, and so on. So in case if these options over here are being selected, that is just basic user attribute modification, I'm going to ensure that this request from here on should only be assigned to the administrator or to any other help desk technician over here. So that's the level of modification and rules I can have it assigned to my technicians. So with that said, I'm going to choose the priority level as medium, and I shall now have this saved. So with that said, we have learned how you can modify the business workflow by choosing the defined roles, playing around with the requester, the reviewer, and the approver. And you can also define which who should have notifications. I mean, how you can define the specific notifications using the notification rules. For instance, in case if a request has been created, or if a request has been reviewed or approved, those notifications can also be set over here. And then we have the assigning rules, which can define in case if a request has been assigned to, in case if the requester is from the HR department, that request, should be assigned to so-and-so technician. So those were the configuration rules, what we had seen under the business workflow. So to give you a quick recap or a summary, what we have performed today with focusing on the delegation workflow, let me just give you a quick recap on the delegation side. So for instance, I can define the level as in the custom role for my technicians over here. And once creating the role, for instance, over here, I could see creating user accounts over here from the HR department. And the most important one, the user attribute privileges. I can define which attributes should be available when the user is creating an account. For instance, first name, last name, and the option to choose a template. Just these options. And I can ensure that the other attributes over here are being left out, so that user should not have access to these attributes over here. They would all be defined in the template itself. And with that said, now that I have a role for user creation, I would simply save the role and I can have that role assigned to one of my technicians. So I would just go back to help desk technicians, have that role assigned to one of my HRs. If you could see, that role has already been selected. And I can also ensure that only certain OUs are available for the user creation. And in case if impersonation as an admin is being selected, it's going to impersonate as the account which is being available under the domain settings. So with that said, I would simply sign out and log in as the HR associate to show you how the user interface is going to be. So for instance, if this is going to be your HR associate user interface, if you click on create new user account over here, you will find out that only necessary attributes can be populated by this HR. So it could be just providing the first name over here, provided to the last account, the last name. And if you notice, all the other attributes over here have been set. And if I wish to, in case if I have the option to choose a template, which I have, I will simply click on the necessary template over here, and accordingly all the attributes will be populated. So all I will have to do from my end, being in HR, is log into ADManager, input the first name and the last name, choose the necessary template over here, and click on create. And let's say go for the service desk template over here, since I don't have the privilege to choose any of the other attributes. I will simply click on create. So that's how I can define a user creation by delegating a specific role to my HRs over here. Now let us say for instance you don't want your HRs to have access to create users, but you want to have that raised as a ticket. This is where I will jump into the workflow module. So with the workflow module, we had learned which ticket, how the tickets, can be raised for the technicians over here. Let me just quickly log in as the admin, the default admin over here. And again, with the help of business workflow, you can find out the level of execution, as in you can define the custom roles over here. The order could be starting from a requester, reviewer, and the approver. And you can also define, what should be the business workflow in your AD organization, whether to just have a requester and the approver. And at the same time, you can define in case if your requester, let's say, if you don't want the HR to create accounts, but instead it should go as a ticket, you can define to whom that ticket should be assigned to, and that can be configured under the assigning rules. So anybody from the HR department request, that should be assigned to a specific technician, and so on. And you can also set up your own notification rules as well. So which means anytime a request has been created, that notification should be sent to the necessary distribution groups or the technicians. So that can be achieved using the workflow tab over here. With that said, we have learned completely with respect to the workflow and AD delegation. If you do have any questions, I would request you to use the question pane and let me know. Once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time for this workshop. We hope you can give us a feedback on what are the next topics you would like to have focused on our upcoming workshop series. Once again, thank you so much for being an amazing audience. This is Sid. Have a great day ahead.